Hi, my name is Vince Dinh, and I was born in Saigon, Vietnam. My Vietnamese name is actually Pham. The neighborhood that I grew up in was in Saigon itself, and the house that we lived in was, I would say, comparative to like a townhouse here in the U.S. And of course, as a child, everything seems a lot bigger because in my mind, it seemed like our townhouse was quite large. But we visited a few years ago, and it was actually not that big at all. But you know, my father was well off, so we had all the amenities like electricity and or plumbing and telephone and so forth. I think it was like a 4-bedroom, 3-bath townhouse. And my father's name was Chow. My mom's name was Yang. And my father was a lawyer, and my mom actually, I think she was a pharmacist. And so I think it's interesting because I have a vague memory of what I did as a child for fun. Was we went to like the zoo for some reason. I thought that was something that stood out. And the other thing I did was like go and take karate classes or something like that. So we came to the U.S. in 1975, actually, literally in the nick of time. So my father, fortunately, had a connection where we were able to get out right before the end of the war in 75. So he had a connection where we were able to literally go to the airstrip. And I still remember getting onto like a U.S. Army airplane and flying out. And fortunately, we did go the day we did, because the very next day, that airstrip was actually bombed. And so we would have been stranded in Vietnam had we not gone out on that, literally that same day. So we initially, I think the way it works was when you leave Vietnam, you go to like a I want to call it a little more like a camp while they kind of get things sorted out. And we're fortunate enough to get a sponsor family, and that sponsor family happened to be in Washington State. So that's where we lived for a year or so. And my father actually did not go out with us. He stayed back, and he had actually go to the U.S. via one of those big cargo ships that you see on looking back on television. There's these cargo ships with tons of people on there, and that's how he got out of Vietnam. And so he joined us in Washington State. We stayed with the sponsor family for a few months, and when we had enough money saved up, we were able to get out and rent a place of our own. And I think we still stayed in Washington for like another year. Fortunately for me, I was able to, for the most part, start off going to school in the US, so I'm very much Americanized that way. We end up in the Bay Area. We lived in San Jose in this little duplex. And so my dad, he tried, but he couldn't pass the bar. Only job he could get was actually being a janitor again. So he was actually a janitor at it was like a Vietnamese office building. And so the people there, they were craving, Asian supplies. We actually turned our living room into, we set up a counter there. And so every weekend, people would come to our house to pick up Asian groceries. And so my dad, every Friday, I think he did this for months. Every Friday, he would go down to LA, pick up the supplies, come back. And so he would just regularly do that. And so we did that until we got, I think somebody complained. And of course, it was me who I came home from school again. And there was, I think somebody from the city or something there saying, hey, we have a complaint that you guys are doing business out of your home. And of course, I would kind of show them around, but I didn't show them the garage because that's where we had shelving, right, for all the groceries. So I just showed them the counter in the living room. And I said, oh yeah, we're, this is what we have. And then, luckily, but anyways, we got caught. And so my dad actually had to do the real thing, and he ended up getting opening one of the first biggest Asian grocery stores. He thought that it was a good idea to take on the restaurant that was going out of business next to our grocery store in downtown San Jose. But unfortunately, running two businesses, completely different types of businesses like that, was too much. And I still remember my dad asking me, and this was crazy because he was like, "Son, which one should we keep?" And of course, I like to eat, right? So I'm like, "Oh yeah, we got to keep the restaurant." And that was a bad business move, because the restaurant was not successful. The Asian grocery store was successful, but that was the one that he sold. And then he started basically being a restaurateur. Of course, the restaurant that we kept, it didn't last. And then he decided to open a series of Chinese buffets, which in itself could be a really good concept, except for instead of it being like a Panda Express where we were serving them, it was literally all you can eat. And of course, that didn't work as well. I think because when it's all you can eat, people like got sick of the food, they didn't come back as often and so forth. But anyways, he opened like 3 or 4 of those, and all this time I was in high school. I went to Piedmont Hills High School, and so I just knew in the back of my mind that my dad was a entrepreneur and restaurateur, and he kept opening restaurants. And I graduated, and then went to University of the Pacific, and that's where I met my wife, and we literally got married right out of college. I think we met each other through a business fraternity called Delta Sigma Pi, and so right out of college we got married. And of course, both of us had business degrees, and the timing was perfect because that was when my father realized, hey, this Chinese buffet thing was not working. So he had the great idea of opening a Japanese restaurant, and this was prior to Japanese food being popular. And I still remember him. I'm coming home from college one day, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna open a Japanese restaurant." And I'm like, "Dad, you're Japanese food? Like, we're talking raw fish and sushi?" And he's like, "Yeah." So of course, he spent a lot of money and a lot of time building this Japanese restaurant. And so fortunately for him, it was my wife and I that we graduated with a business degree. That was when he was like, getting ready to open it. And I still remember, I think we literally did an all-nighter to get the restaurant ready for the grand opening. He was forcing the issue, so he invited the mayor. He basically had this big gathering, this big party. So my wife and I spent the first 7 years of our careers, running Kobe. It was tons of work. I think after 7 years, you decide, you know what, we really gotta do something different. And fortunately for us, we had actually had a friend that we went to college with, and her husband was actually working at Yahoo. And I got an interview through him at Yahoo, and that pretty much changed everything, because I got the job. And I still remember walking around with him saying, "Hey, so you mean to say that my job is to go to work, sit there, and then leave at whatever, 5 or 6? And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, sign me up," because the restaurant business was like 24/7. We were leaving at 10 o'clock in the evening, and it was insane. And of course, making that switch to Yahoo was one of the best moves. And I loved it so much that I actually got my wife in shortly after. I'm like, you gotta join this company, right? It was a really cool company, and back then it was 99, and it was very early on. Things were just going crazy with Yahoo, and I'm still there today. So it's been 22 plus years. I've been through it all, through the boom, and then the bust, the .com bust, all the rounds of layoffs that we've had. And I mean, just all the ups and downs, no regrets. It's been quite the ride. And but yeah, so that's pretty much how we went from, you know, restaurant business to tech. And fortunately, it was you know, having that connection and was able to make the transition. And but yeah, that's pretty much how we ended up, you know, today. And it's been quite the journey.